This all went down just last year. My friend Jimmy is pretty well entrenched in the music scene. More specifically, he's deeply involved in the dance and electronic music community along the East Coast, especially around New Jersey and New York. Honestly, it's impressive what he and his crew have built in just 2 years. Basically, their company puts on what they call events at top-tier venues, usually the most popular club or nightlife spot in whatever city they're operating in. Then they bring in the talent, which, believe it or not, is often a big name or borderline famous DJ. I'm not really plugged into that world, so I can't name names, but I know for a fact they've booked some serious heavy hitters. But that's just the backstory. Jimmy and I go way back, over 20 years. I've known him nearly my whole life, and he's been one of my closest friends through all of it. Because of that, he hooks me and a bunch of our friends up with free access to his events, including hanging out backstage or in VIP with the performers. It's actually a sweet setup, and I probably don't tell him thanks nearly enough. That 4th of July weekend, Jimmy was throwing a massive party on the Jersey Shore. It was set to be his biggest production yet, and all of our shared friends were going. He asked me to come down early with him, and of course I said yes. Jimmy, our buddy Ryan, and I made the 90-minute drive and got to the venue about 4 hours before it opened to the public. Since Ryan and I weren't part of the setup crew, we had time to kill. So we started drinking. Jimmy and his staff had open access to the venue's alcohol stash, and Ryan and I absolutely took full advantage of that. By the time the first DJ hit the stage, we were already feeling pretty tipsy, if not more. I mean, it was the 4th of July weekend, so we figured it was fair game. Fast forward a couple hours, and we were fully hammered. Honestly, I can't recall another time I was that drunk since, not even close. That said, Ryan and I aren't kids. We can usually hold our liquor. We weren't throwing up or making scenes or anything like that. The real issue was just poor judgment and lowered inhibition. But still, we were having fun, or at least that's how I remember it. As the night began to wind down, it hit that familiar turning point, when people start figuring out how they're getting home or who they're going home with. Jimmy had booked an Airbnb nearby and promised us both a place to sleep, so we weren't worried about that. But the second part, that was our mission. Ryan and I made our way over to the bar and struck up a conversation with a couple girls who caught our eye. Before long, it was clear who we'd be ending the night with. Neither of us are male models or anything, but we're both over 6 feet tall, and in Jersey Shore nightlife, that's practically currency. For whatever reason, most guys down there are on the shorter side, so just being tall gives you a weird advantage. That seems to be what most girls out there look for. Not looks, not charm, not brains, just height. Don't ask me why. Jersey girls are still a mystery to me. I'm probably off with their names, but I'm fairly sure they introduce themselves as Gianna and Marcella. That's about where my memory starts to blur. From what I recall, it was Marcella who floated the idea of the four of us continuing the night elsewhere, and Ryan and I were all for it. Gianna handed each of us a drink and said we needed to catch up to their level, even though we'd already drank enough to sink a ship. Now I know girls giving guys drinks isn't super common, and yeah, it did strike me as unusual, but they looked well off, judging by their outfits. After finishing the drinks, the four of us started making our way toward the exit. As soon as we stepped outside, Marcella offered up her beach house as the next stop. That threw me off a little. Usually in situations like this, it's the guys offering a place. But they were adamant that her place was way nicer than any random Airbnb we had. She had a point, so we didn't object. We walked along the shoreline, chatting, and I remember thinking how sharp and cultured these girls sounded. It was refreshing, talking about more than just clubbing and shallow small talk. Not just with girls, but with intoxicated people in general. At some point, I actually started feeling a little self-conscious, like I wasn't making sense or coming off dumb because I was so drunk. That's when I noticed I was suddenly feeling way more intoxicated than I had earlier, but it wasn't the kind of drunk I knew. It felt like my whole body was too heavy to hold up. My legs felt weak and stiff, like cardboard almost. It became harder to move, to speak, even to focus my eyes. My limbs were going numb. But weirdly, after a couple minutes, it faded, and I just felt drunk again. Normal drunk. That's around when we reached the beach house. It was unreal. Maybe I was exaggerating because of how gone I was, but it honestly looked like the kind of place a pro athlete would own. Once we got inside, we took our shoes off and stepped into what I assumed was the living room. I say assumed because the place was so lavish, it didn't look like any living room I'd ever seen. It had a modern yet minimal style, but still had art. Actual sculptures on pedestals, and somehow it all fit together without looking overdone. It was elegant, but understated. I wish I'd had the presence of mind to snap a photo. My head was elsewhere, so was Ryan's, apparently, because within 15 minutes of walking in, he and Marcella had vanished somewhere into the house, leaving me with Gianna. She leaned in to kiss me, and that's it. That's the last concrete memory I have. Not even the kiss itself, just her leaning in, then nothing. I didn't feel another wave of dizziness. Completely. Suggest I just blacked out from drinking. This was different. I don't normally black out, and when I do, I still retain flashes, bits and pieces, enough to piece together the general timeline. And this time, I wasn't even as drunk as I've been before. Plus, Ryan experienced the exact same thing at nearly the same moment. That's too specific to chalk up to coincidence. Next thing I remember, waking up under the sun, lying in a bush in some unknown location more than an hour away from where the party had been. I didn't realize that yet because my phone wasn't on me. Actually, none of my stuff was. No wallet, no keys. But worst of all, I wasn't even wearing my own clothes. And they weren't Ryan's either, just some strangers. The only thing still mine, my shoes, soaking wet and missing the laces. My head was pounding like crazy. Everything felt hazy, like I was coming out of anesthesia. I just laid there staring at the sky, trying to process it all. The clothes, the missing items, the wet shoes. It was like I had been in water, but I didn't smell like chlorine or salt. The scariest part was the blankness. I had no idea what had happened. Had I been in an accident? Had someone slipped something into my drink? There was a 10-hour gap in my memory, and nothing brought it back. I eventually stood up and realized I wasn't in a beach town anymore, no ocean in sight, just forest and a curving road. The only sign of life was a 7-Eleven across the street. I headed straight for it. I asked the guy at the counter if I could borrow his phone and explained that mine had been stolen. He paused for a second, clearly sizing me up, then passed it over. I called the only number I could remember besides my parents, my sisters. No way was I calling Mom or Dad. She answered immediately. I tried explaining everything, and she gave me Ryan's number. I called it multiple times, no response. That's when the panic really set in. What if he'd been drugged too? What if he'd been dumped in some other town alone? I was about to call the police when, believe it or not, Ryan walked right into the same 7-Eleven. We locked eyes, then did a sort of stunned fist bump. He shared his story with me, and yep, it was practically identical. That confirmed it for both of us. We called the police right away and thanked the store clerk profusely. A few minutes later, we were outside giving our statements. At first, the officers seemed to take us seriously, but as the details came out, their attitude started shifting. Were we sure we weren't just blackout drunk? Maybe we wandered off and passed out. They weren't accusing us, but it was clear they didn't buy the whole story. I told them it didn't make sense. We couldn't have walked over an hour in that condition. One of them didn't like that answer. I gave them my sister's number, told them she'd been tracking my phone. Turns out, my phone was showing up in a random parking lot just a few minutes away. The cops offered to drive us there. Sure enough, both our phones were just lying there on the ground side by side. Getting them back was a relief, but it only convinced the officers more that we'd just drunkenly dropped them. They even suggested we hadn't been robbed, just careless. We asked if they'd checked the beach house the girls had taken us to. They basically brushed us off. Said we probably just remembered things wrong. One of them even said, "Happens more often than you think." They handed us their business cards and told us to reach out if we remembered anything else. Then they drove off. I opened my phone, and things got even stranger. There were outgoing texts from me to all kinds of people. Jimmy, my parents, co-workers, even some girls I'd been messaging. The weird part? The messages sounded like me. Normal, coherent, like I was having a calm night in. But when you compared them all, they didn't make sense together. One message to Jimmy said we crashed at a friend's place. Another to my dad claimed we'd found a couch. One to a girl I'd been flirting with just said I was chilling and thinking about her. It was all inconsistent, completely at odds with each other. I called Jimmy. He was relieved, said he'd feared the worst, told us to stay put, he'd come pick us up. While we waited, Ryan and I froze our bank accounts, but weirdly, none of our cards had been used. The whole drive back, we went in circles about what happened. Nothing added up. Yeah, we were clearly drugged, but not in any usual way. Most sedatives just knock you out. But we were up, walking, texting. Why would someone go through all that effort just to rob a couple random guys? And if that was the point, why not use the cards? Why take us to a place so risky? Your own home? Or had they broken in? Jimmy floated the idea that we were targeted, but we were the ones who approached them. And that's not even getting into the bizarre clothes swap, or how we got an hour away. We even checked for surgical scars, half joking that our organs were missing. Nothing. Jimmy suggested maybe it was some rare drug. That could be. But someone had transported us and changed our outfits. We didn't let it go. Ryan and I drove back to the shore a few days later and tried retracing our steps. Eventually, walking along the beach, we did find a house. We walked up and rang the bell. An older man answered. I asked if anyone named Marcella lived there, or if he had a daughter deep, gut-twisting unease. It wasn't fear, just a sick, cold feeling, like something very wrong had happened, and we'd never find out what. For a long time after, I was convinced those girls were part of something way bigger than we could understand. Maybe they planned to do something horrible and backed out. Maybe they didn't. We'll probably never know. But if something new ever comes up, I'll definitely send an update.